Hi everyone, and welcome to Horry County Schools, A Pathway for Back to School segment. I'm Lisa Borsier, Director of Strategic Communications, and joining me today are several members of our leadership team. We know many of you are anxious and nervous about this school year, so we wanted to take some time today and go over the many questions that we have received from our parents and students over the last couple of weeks. So hopefully after this session, you will have all the information you need for a successful back to school. So before we get started, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our team members that are with us today. To my right, we have Dr. Rick Maxey, our Superintendent of Horry County Schools. Ms. Boone Myrick, who is our Chief Officer of Academics. Ms. Edie Cox, who is our Executive Director of Online Learning and Instructional Technology. Mr. Mark Porter, Executive Director of Elementary Education. Ms. Candace Lane is our Executive Director for Middle Schools. Ms. April Scott is our Executive Director of Secondary Schools, and Ms. Kristen Wilson is Executive Director of Federal Programs. Due to social distancing requirements that we have, we're only able to have 6 individuals on our stage at a time. So we will cover our academics portion of this program first, and then we'll take a quick break and do a little switching up of some of our speakers, and we will have some additional speakers join us on the second part of our program. So I do ask our speakers if they would go ahead and keep their mask on when they're not talking, but when you are able to speak, you can safely remove your mask to do so. So to go ahead and begin our program, we'll open up to some opening remarks with Dr. Maxey.
Thank you, Lisa. We're very excited about this opportunity today to get together and share information that we think is valuable to our parents, our students, and the community. And of course, today is August 31st, a highly anticipated day as far as Horry County Schools is concerned, because we received the report from the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control that is going to determine what our first week of school is going to be like. So I have that information, and I want to share with you that the report for today is a medium spread level. So just as a reminder, I know that this has been shared previously, but we have received this information weekly on Mondays from SCDHEC, and basically what it does is it informs the public as to the level of disease activity in a particular county. Now, if you look at the metering that we have 3 possibilities here. If the disease spread activity is high, you see it over into the red zone there. If it's medium, the tan color, and if it's low spread, it is green. Now, what those correspond to, as far as our instructional models are concerned, if the disease spread level is low, that means that we would go to school 5 days per week, in person, everybody. If the disease spread activity is medium, what that means is that we will be operating on a hybrid instructional day with groups assigned to a specific day, and they will go to school 2 days per week and have a distance learning day on a Friday. So if we look at the meter for today, just as a reminder, the one for medium, because that is the report that has been shared with us, that means that we're going to start school the day after Labor Day with our first group of students, and it's going to be with the hybrid instructional model. Now, what's important about this report is that it's an ongoing thing, and we will receive that report from DHEC every Monday, and we will use that to determine what the following week looks like as far as the instructional model. So we have a lot of information we want to share with our audience, Lisa. So having provided that information, I do want to say welcome back as far as school is concerned. We're looking forward to welcoming our students back to a very different school year, but it's going to be a successful one. Lisa?
Thank you. So we know students and parents were given a choice between a full-time K-12 virtual program or a hybrid instructional model, which does include face-to-face instruction. So first, let's start talking about the hybrid instructional model. So I will ask Ms. Myrick if you can explain, please, the 3 learning options that are under that hybrid instructional model.
Dr. Maxey mentioned several of these, but I'll just go over all three just to clarify that we do have three distinct instructional models. The first one is if the based on the report from DHEC, is low spread, then we would be in a traditional face-to-face instructional model. And as he just said, based on the medium disease spread, we would be on a hybrid model. That model is a combination, and again, I'm saying some of the same things that he just said, would be a combination of face-to-face instruction and distance learning. And again, students will be grouped and they will attend on certain days. On the days that they're not attending face-to-face, they will actually engage in distance learning at home or wherever they may be. Then the third is the high spread, and for high spread, we would be implementing full-time distance learning. In this case, teachers would make assignments through a learning management system, and they would communicate with their students through that learning management system and using other devices or digital tools for that purpose.
Great. So when we talk about the hybrid model and we talk about the groupings of group A and B, I know a lot of people are curious on whether siblings will be able to stay together in those groups. So will students in the same family be able to attend face-to-face classes on those same days?
We recognize that that is a need for our families, and we have made every effort to make sure that we can group them so that in the same household that they will attend on the same day.
Great. And so when will they actually start receiving their class schedules and actually know when they're assigned to those groups?
Our goal is to make sure that we get the schedules out this week. We are looking at a tentative date. Right now, our plan, I think Dr. Maxey's already said that. He mentioned the date. But they will receive those, and on their schedules, they will have whether it's an A or B group, for example, so that they will know which days that they will attend the first day for school.
And so we know that September 7th is a holiday, so Monday, the first of the week, we will not have school. So the Group A will actually begin their first and only instructional day on that Tuesday.
That's correct, because we want to stay with that as much as we can. So Group A will just attend one day the first week, Group B will have 2 days, and then the 5th day of the week would be distance learning for everyone.
Okay, perfect. And so will student attendance be recorded on days students are on a hybrid schedule and full-time distance learning schedules?
Yes, it will. And I need to make sure that people understand, so there's not any confusion, but when the schools were closed in the spring, they were not counted absent. But this year, they will be counted as far as attendance. And people might say, well, how are they going to do that? Well, they will do that through students submitting assignments with virtual check-ins with their teachers. And then obviously the days that they're face-to-face, then they would be in school. But attendance is really important, and we will be keeping those records this year.
And I know we have another speaker come in on the second half of the program that will go into a little bit more details regarding attendance. But we know that school looks different at every school level, whether it's elementary, middle, or high. So I'd like to ask Mr. Porter first, who's over elementary school level, to kind of walk us through what a typical school day will look like for an elementary student.
Thank you, Lisa. In the hybrid flex model, students at the elementary level, pre-K through 5th grade, would attend school 2 days per week, as we've already shared. And on those 2 days per week, they would have an instructional schedule typical to what they would have on a typical school day. So they would have the, of course, content in reading and writing, social studies, and science. In addition to those activities during a hybrid flex day, the only difference is that on the 3 days that they're not in school, they would be participating in distance learning activities that are in their learning platform that Mrs. Myrick referenced earlier. Primary students will be using a learning platform called Seesaw, and that's students CD through 2nd grade, and students in grades 3 through 5 will have activities in Google Classroom. Those activities are in direct relationship to what those students have had on their 2 days of face-to-face instruction from the teacher. That we've done that purposefully because those will be in follow-up to that direct instruction, and that will be a practice and application of those activities they were taught when they were with their teacher. We also want to make certain that we provide activities for our elementary students to be able to go to recess. They will still have recess so that they can have opportunities to stretch, to be able to be outside of the classroom. We know that's very important. So we will have opportunities for students to engage in recess activities. Those students will, of course, be social distanced on the playground. One of the big questions from our elementary students ask, are we going to be able to use our playground equipment? But initially, we will not use playground equipment, but we will be able to go outside for outside recess in structured play activities. We also want to make certain, we know it's really, really important that we take time with these students, all students, to build relationships and have opportunities for collaboration. So there will be also learning activities to build in social and emotional learning opportunities for students in order to be able to build those really important relationships with our students.
I think a lot of our parents and students always enjoy open house and meeting their students and other students that are in their classrooms and who their teachers are. Going to look a little bit different this year, so can you talk to us a little bit about what opportunities that we will offer to our families this school year? Absolutely.
All of our elementary schools will schedule virtual open houses for all of our parents and for our students. In addition to those open houses, Lisa, our teachers will also have Meet the Teacher virtual nights scheduled for their students to be able to check in with their teacher, to meet their teacher virtually, so that teachers can review those very important beginning of year procedures and protocols at the elementary level.
And after-school programs is really pertinent to the elementary school level, and I know a lot of our elementary schools are able to provide some of those opportunities. Will that look different?
It will look different. Not all of our elementary schools will be able to provide after-school child care this year. However, we will have after-school child care at Carolina Forest Elementary, Kingston Elementary, Midland Elementary, Ocean Bay Elementary, River Oaks Elementary, and South Conway Elementary.
Have those sign-ups started, or will information be sent out to parents?
Yes, those sign-outs started last spring, actually, and but they are still, please contact your school if you're interested in after-school child care
Okay.
at one of those locations.
Sounds exciting. And we'll go ahead and move to our middle school level. So we'll ask Ms. Lane also to walk us through what a typical school day will look like for a brand-new middle school student.
Well, the middle school student is going to walk in and we'll have search procedures as we normally do, and they will report directly to their classroom. And for the sake of just explaining, I'm going to take Group B. So Group B will be coming to school on Wednesday and Thursday, and they will follow their normal bell schedule that their school has set, and they will have face-to-face instruction on those 2 days. And on Friday will be a distance learning day for both Group A and Group B. And what that distance learning day looks like is that they will meet with all of their classes following their normal bell schedule for 20 to 25 minutes of direct instruction, and then they will work on their class assignments in Google Classroom for the remainder of the day on a full distance learning day. So the distance learning days that Group B would be that Monday and Tuesday of the following week, those days would be what we would call asynchronous. So they're not going to have live instruction with their teacher. They're going to be in their Google Classroom in the learning management system and completing work, just like Mr. Porter said, based on the direct instruction that they received on that Wednesday and Thursday.
So middle school can be intimidating for rising fifth graders. So will there be some type of virtual open house options available as well?
Yes. Most of our middle schools will be sending out information. Most of the dates for our middle schools are September 3rd and 4th, where they'll have a virtual open house, and then there'll be some more in-depth virtual meetings with teachers and students after school begins. But on September 3rd and September 4th, schools will be sending out information for families to tap into their virtual introduction to what middle school looks like.
And I know that middle school and high school do not offer after child care opportunities, but you do have a lot of clubs and extracurricular organizations that do meet. Will that also look different this school year?
Yes, it will look different. We will continue to have clubs and organizations, but we will continue to meet with those virtually as well until it is safe to do otherwise. But we will have clubs and activities available for students virtually.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Now we have Ms. Scott with high school. I have a rising ninth grader, so she's excited to be entering into the high school realm. So what will a typical high school day look like for our students?
Well, depending on the week and which method by which we'll be instructing. But next week we'll start in hybrid, which in a typical 5-day week, as Ms. Myrick and Dr. Maxey shared, would be 2 days of face-to-face instruction and 3 days of distance learning for students. We will have students, when they enter school, they'll go through the search procedures just like normal. They'll go straight to first block. We will not have our traditional area where students can kind of hang out in the mornings because we need them to be social distanced. So they'll go straight to first block. We will have a more restricted transition between classes, scheduled restroom breaks, cleaning between classes. We'll have lunch in the classrooms for a while until the spread goes down. Teachers will have virtual office hours. We'll have some social and emotional support daily for students. We know that they need that during these difficult times. And we also will be instructing 20 to 45 minutes on those distance learning days so that students will get that face-to-face or that instruction through the computer. We will be making some adjustments for special education and honors classes depending on the needs of the students and the course. And then, of course, for distance learning, that would be 5 days if we go into that mode of instruction virtually, 25 to 45 minutes at the beginning of class. The rest of the class, as Ms. Lane shared, would be students' independent work or small group help if the teacher needs to help a smaller group of students. Teachers, of course, would have virtual office hours. We know that they're going to need that. And then in a distance learning model, the SEL incorporation, the social and emotional support for students, and then adjustments for our special needs students and our honor students as needed.
Okay. I know our school buildings, especially the high school level, is quite a bit larger than our middle schools. So will there also be opportunities for students to get a tour of the school or any type of virtual open house opportunities for
We've
those
been
students?
working closely with the principals to ensure that we're going to communicate information to families. We'll be utilizing our Parent Link system to share messages this week and even after school starts. We've used our social media and will continue to do that. Some of our principals are creating videos. We have some virtual open houses coming up this week. And I want to encourage families to communicate with our schools. They want you to feel safe and welcome as you start your new experience in high school.
And it may be a similar answer to Ms. Lane regarding extracurricular activities and clubs. How will that operate at the high school level?
Well, we certainly want to continue those opportunities. We know that's a huge part of the success at the high school level of our students. So we'll begin most of our clubs and activities virtually, and as the spread level changes, we may transition into some more face-to-face options depending on safety and what we can do within the size of our schools and our different clubs and activities. So we're excited about school starting, and we certainly will want to give those opportunities for students.
And flexibility is certainly the key to all of this. As we know, dynamics and situations change, so we know that those opportunities could it be expanded throughout the process as well through the school year. Thank you so much. So we're moving to the virtual portion of the program now. So we have Ms. Cox joining us to talk about the K-12 virtual program that we have. So would you be able to walk us through what a typical day would look like in terms for our virtual students?
We know that families have a lot of questions about the virtual world because it's going to be a little different from what they experienced as part of e-learning. So families and students should plan to set aside time, much like the traditional school day, to work on coursework. The difference would be there would be some flexibility because most of the instruction is asynchronous and already pre-prepared. But we have found that students who really set aside and take care of time management and schedule their day, much like the traditional day, are much more successful in an online course. An elementary student, for example, can plan to spend approximately 3 to 5 hours per course per week, and maybe 1 hour for a specials course. So that would be the elementary day. For middle and high schools, their schedules would be much more flexible, but we do know from experience that parents and students must schedule their time much like the school day, and that helps students remain on pace and make sure they stay up with that week's work.
So would students be required to be on their computers at certain times of the day, or does that allow a little bit of flexibility throughout?
At the elementary level, there are required live meetings with teachers. As you can imagine, for our young learners, they require much more support from parents as well as teachers. As students get older, they become more independent. So at the middle and high school level, those meetings will be set up by their teachers, and there will be some required live meetings, but most of the instruction is flexible and is asynchronous. So students can really work at their own pace.
And we did have to set a firm deadline for signing up for the virtual program, which was August 10th. Are parents still able to enroll in that program? And if not, can you kind of explain the reasoning behind that?
Yeah. As you can imagine, we are finalizing schedules not only in the virtual school but our brick and mortar schools. So unfortunately, August 10th was the deadline for the virtual school enrollment in order to get teachers assigned and things ready for our September 8th start.
So just like the brick and mortar schools, looking forward to finding out the information regarding their class schedules and if they're in group A or B. Virtual students are the same. They're interested in knowing who their teachers will be and their class schedules. When will they receive that information?
On the same timeline. So
Okay.
we look to get those schedules out this week.
So this is kind of new to a lot of parents and a lot of students because they may have taken an online class here and there, but this is actually a full-time program. So what are some expectations for parents or any advice that you would give entering into this full-time program?
Well, we know that parents of elementary age students, they're going to be much more hands-on, involved in guiding students with projects and some of the work that they must do. So that on-site supervision of a parent, particularly for those elementary students, is key and really important to ensure those students are successful. And again, as students become more independent as they get older, we would just encourage parents to every week check their students' pacing guide, check in with your students' teachers. Teachers want to hear from you, parents, to make sure you know where your students are and make sure they're on pace in their coursework for the week.
Will grades be loaded on PowerSchool on the virtual program similar to?
Our grades, actually the virtual program will use a separate student information system. So those grades will be in that system and our teachers will be able to communicate that to parents as needed.
Okay, great. And I know we've released our back-to-school supply list for elementary, middle, and high school students. We'll get more information regarding that, their first week of school, from their individual teachers. But what kind of supplies are needed for a virtual student?
We've asked and shared with many that students should really use the same supply list that their school sent out because those are really basic supplies that all students need no matter what course. There are 3 other items that are really key for our virtual students and their parents. One is to be sure you pick up your device from your base school at the designated times in whatever schedule your school has set. Also, it's really important that a student at any age has access or easy access to a phone so that they can communicate regularly and easily with their teachers. So if it's an elementary student, we would ask those parents to be sure that a phone is handy. So if there's any time they need to ask questions or contact the teacher, it would be available. And then the last thing is a working printer, particularly for our elementary age students. We've advertised that a working printer is very important, or at least access to a printer. Many of the activities in our elementary curriculum may be print-based. A lot of those are just practice activities, which are very important for children at that young age.
Okay. And we've been getting a lot of questions regarding students who are enrolled in the virtual program because it's new. Will they still be able to participate in their base school activities and athletics?
Absolutely. Eligible students, they're still students of their home school, so they are eligible to participate in athletics and other extracurricular activities.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Another segment that we have received lots of questions is surrounding our special education portion of the school district. And so I'll ask Ms. Wilson if you can kind of discuss some of the accommodations that will be provided to our students, not only in the brick and mortar schools, but our virtual students.
Thank you, Lisa. And first, I'll piggyback off of Mrs. Cox and address our virtual students. Many of the accommodations that a student would receive in the brick and mortar building may not be as applicable if they're participating in a virtual environment. So first, team managers and case managers will have to make a determination with families as to what a student may need in that virtual environment. Many of those accommodations are embedded into much of the curriculum that we're using. For example, oral administration. Many of the lessons are already provided orally. There is closed captioning. So those things would be accounted for within the actual curriculum. However, beyond that, any of our students that are special education students who are participating in Horry County Schools Virtual will be assigned a case manager and/or a team lead who will ensure that they receive the necessary accommodations or services that they need to access and make progress in that curriculum.
Now, in the hybrid model, will special education students have more than 2 days face-to-face time since there's additional need for intense instruction and additional support for those students?
And we do recognize we do have certain populations of students with disabilities that have more intense needs than other students. And as social distancing will allow, we do have plans to consider additional days for those students. But we do have to first consider the number of students within that classroom to ensure that we can ensure all of the proper health and safety precautions.
Now, how available will special education teachers be in order to provide students with additional help and support in the hybrid and distance learning models?
Well, just as our virtual students, all of our special education students will continue to be connected to their teacher and/or teachers and service providers, because many of our students have multiple providers that work with them. And so they will continue to support those students during face-to-face days and building days that they're in the buildings, just as they always have. But then on those distance learning days, they will be scheduling possible small group instruction, things that may need to be provided extra above and beyond that for a student without a disability as needed.
And I think, which is on the minds of a lot of parents, is the safety and health precautions that we have in place. So can you kind of discuss a little bit of what you have in store for our special education programs?
And again, we have certain populations of students that most certainly require our staff to be in close contact with them because of the students' health and safety needs because of their disabling condition. And so we are prepared in those classrooms. We've provided them with additional personal protective equipment beyond that's provided in our classrooms for students without disabilities. So things such as gowns, face shields, gloves, so additional PPE to make sure that there's that extra layer of protection for both our students and our staff.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Wilson. We have one last section to touch on for our education portion of this segment is our English learners, and we know that that is a very special population at Horry County Schools. So I'll ask Ms. Myrick if you can share with us some services that will be provided to our English learner students.
Without going into specific services, we will provide instruction for our EL students and any additional services they may need, and it makes no difference as to the model, whether it's a hybrid or distance learning or virtual. We will provide those services. Also, as needed, students will be provided with accommodations, and then their individualized learning plans will continue to be developed and implemented. So we want to make sure that we are supporting them and ensuring their success through that support.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you all for joining us. This kind of wraps up our academic portion of this segment. So we will take a quick break and we're going to switch out our speakers and we'll be back. We'd like to welcome everybody back to our second part of our program. We have some additional speakers that are joining us today, and I'd like to go ahead and introduce our special guest. We have Ms. Velna Allen, Chief Officer of Student Services, Mr. Robert Grimes, Transportation Coordinator, Ms. Kim Johnson, Director of Nutrition Services, Mr. Darrell Brown, Chief Officer of Support Services, Ms. Tammy Truelove, Director of Health and Safety Services, and Mr. Aaron Wilkes, Coordinator of Attendance. And like we did previously, we will ask our speakers to keep their face mask on, and then when you are speaking, you are safely able to remove it So we thank you all for being here. And this is another important part of our segment because there's a lot of logistics and operations that go behind the scenes. And so we have some great people here joining us to give us some additional information. We'll start with technology. Technology is a big part of Horry County Schools, and we have spent a lot of investment in our technology within our schools. And so, Ms. Allen, would you be able to briefly explain our personalized learning program for this upcoming school year and how the devices will be utilized?
Yes, we're currently now one-to-one for our students in CD through 12th grade. And each student who would like a device will be issued a device if their parent would like to take one home. And then we will, as lessons, as for virtual, they will have the virtual lessons. They'll be able to use those computers at home to participate if they're in the virtual school with their virtual lesson, or if they're in brick and mortar or we're on a hybrid day, they'll be able to utilize those to complete their assignments.
And I know a lot of schools have already been sending out information for a device pickup and some makeup days for that device pickup. So I'm sure if anybody has any questions, they can talk directly to their school regarding those devices for
That's
that.
correct.
There was a national article a couple of weeks ago about delays in purchasing computers because so many districts across the United States have been trying to purchase those. I think Horry County Schools is in a pretty good position. Can you talk a little bit about any delays we may have in some of our devices?
Sure. The only delay that we may have is we're expecting our last shipment of iPads. They are expected to come in at the end of this week. So it may be the end of the first week before all of our elementary students are able to gain an iPad, but we should have them out by the end of next week.
And technology fee is something that most middle school and high school students are accustomed, but now that we have those one-to-one devices at the elementary school, it might be a little bit different, and they've been receiving some information. So can you talk about the purpose of the technology fee and how it's used?
Sure. I want to say, first of all, though, because this has been a big question,
Right.
It is not required. Parents can opt out of paying the technology fee if they would like. But what it does, it acts like an insurance policy. If you pay that $25 technology fee and the device is damaged or let's say they break a keyboard or they lose the charger, then it helps offset the cost of the repair for the device, just like an insurance policy would. If they don't pay the $25 and don't have the insurance, then the parent is expected to pay for the entire bill if there is a damage or a loss fee.
Okay. And how secured are our networks, and what kind of programs do we have in place to kind of protect the learning process?
Well, we're very excited about that, and we have tested it. All of our devices, even at home, will go through our filtering system. And so we will filter. There'll be certain websites that they cannot get to or cannot gain access to. So we are filtering those to protect our students.
And those are on our computers that are issued to the students?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. And so we've seen some of this going on with the colleges starting up, and how will we handle holding students accountable if they start to interrupt online classes or displaying any type of inappropriate behavior?
We will handle all disciplinary infractions the same as if they were in a brick and mortar school. That behavioral infraction will be a classroom disruption, and we'll follow our policies and procedures for dealing with that. So it doesn't matter if they're in the building or if they're online, we're not going to let our students disrupt the classroom.
Okay. And a lot of our parents work a little bit later, and so I know that you've been able to do some flexibility in your technology help desk hours to help those technical questions. Can you explain a little bit about how you're adjusting some of those staff hours?
Sure. We'll still be available during the regular school day, actually from 8 to 4:30 for any parent or student who needs to call in. But we've also added some additional hours. We'll be open from 5 to 7:30 at night to answer any questions they may have.
And are those for every day or distance learning days? Those
No,
extended
Monday through
hours?
Friday.
Okay. And Wi-Fi has been something that's been talked about a lot regarding opportunities for people that may not have those options. So how have we been working with other providers and trying to expand some of our Wi-Fi options?
Well, we actually have two options. We're working with our local co-op, Horry Telephone, and they will be providing service to homes much like they did in the spring when we first went out for COVID-19. But we've also ordered hotspots from our state through our State Department. And once they arrive, they're not here yet, but once they arrive, we'll be looking at qualified students and giving them the opportunity to come and pick up a hotspot that they can use with the provider in their area.
Okay, thank you for joining us. We'll switch now to transportation, and we have Mr. Grimes joining us. Can you explain some of the newer state requirements when it comes to bus capacity and some of our protocols that will come in place this upcoming school year?
Yes, the state is requiring a maximum number of 68% of the capacity of, the rated capacity of a bus, so transportation, so that means that a 78 capacity bus to transport elementary kids can only transport 52 students now. Or high school students, they could once transfer 58, they can only transfer 39 at this point. They've also implemented the sanitizing of the bus twice daily, once at the end of their morning routes and once after their afternoon routes. And that drivers wipe down with a disinfectant all the high-touch areas such as the handrails or backs of seats between routes. The state is requiring face coverings to be worn on the school bus at all times by anyone on the bus, the driver, an aide, or in all students. And they're not requiring it, but and we do this anyway, but having seating assignments so that we can track students.
And that becomes more important than ever this upcoming school year for that. When we talk about developing bus routes and times, there's a lot of dynamics that goes on behind the scenes when it comes to programming that. So when will we finalize a lot of those timing and bus stops?
It's like bus stops are like a living document, kind of. They change daily, even in a normal situation. Currently, our 5-day schedule and hybrid schedule bus stops are on the website right now, the times and the stops. Of course, they'll be adjusted the closer we get to the school year and as the first couple days, but basically they're ready to go right now.
So the best information is to go to the Horry County School website transportation page, and I think you have a portion where they can put in their street address, and the bus stops and bus numbers will actually pull up.
Yes.
I know we always talk about the first week of school being kind of flexible with that, so we ask for patience as well this school year as we kind of adjust those times and stops for that. Facebook page, that's something that is new over the last couple of years that y'all have implemented, and what kind of great information is shared with parents on your individual pages?
The good thing is that anything that's going on with their specific trips, if there's a delay or construction delay or we're running late for any reason, we can throw out a message and get to those students specifically in that area, or we can go through if it's a whole district-wide, we can do it there too.
With the full-time K through 12 virtual program being a semester base, and knowing that that could change where some of those students may return to brick and mortar, will that change the bus schedules for next semester?
The routes themselves will stay the same, but the times will have to be adjusted.
But the bus numbers will remain the same, but the times could be adjusted?
Right.
Okay, thank you. We'll move now to nutrition services, and joining us is Ms. Johnson. Thank you for being here. We'd like to ask if you could briefly explain the logistics of how breakfast and lunches will be served on a hybrid schedule in the brick and mortar schools at all school levels.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Breakfast and lunch will be delivered to the classrooms during our hybrid spread, and it'll be delivered to students that request a meal. It is important to understand that the meal will be charged out based on the child's meal status, so it's very important to fill out that application process for meals. And schools will have the option to move to a hallway service when the spread declines and decreases, and as long as the safety for social distancing and measures are taken in here too.
Will we also be able to provide breakfast and lunch for our students that are on the distance learning days as well as their virtual students?
Yes, Lisa. Student meals will be available for daily curbside pickup at all school locations from the times between 11 and 12 p.m. And actual pickup locations at each school will be determined by that school, so you will be asked to contact the school to find out their particular location. These meals will be based again on the child's status, and it will be for our distance learnings. And our for our distance learnings and our virtual learners. And we ask that parents do pick up those meals at their child's school of attendance so that a proper meal accountability can take place. And breakfast and lunch meals will be served at their curbside service, and modifications can be made if we see that participation warrants that.
I know going into this school year, it'll look a little bit different than our summer programs because we were able to offer those meals free. But this time we will be charging for those meals, and so it is important to fill out that new free and reduced meal application. Could you talk a little bit about that and the difference between that and a CEP school?
Sure. We have 17 CEP schools in the district, and if your child attends one of those schools, they receive their meals at no cost. And the CEP is a community eligibility provision that the regulations are set by USDA. However, if you do have a child that attends a CEP school and a child that attends a non-CEP school, applications are required. If your child is just at a CEP school, then an application is not required. However, we want to be sure that we don't miss any children that are not in the non-CEP schools.
And what would be the easiest way for parents to pay for those meals, especially if they're coming at the grab-and-go sites at curbside? What's the easiest way to handle that?
We do have an online system called myschoolbucks.com, and we encourage all parents to go set up an online account for meal payment systems. However, we will be accepting cash and checks in sealed envelopes with the parent's name, the child's name, and telephone number at our schools for meal payments.
Exact change?
Exact change? Yes, please.
Would be the easiest way to go.
But we'll be happy to take whatever, and we just encourage you to use that myschoolbucks.com, as it's a really great service.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
We will move now to facilities. They have been very busy this summer preparing our schools for our students and our staff, and I have Mr. Brown with us and ask you if you could briefly explain some of the safety precautions and describe what a typical school will look like.
Well, I guess, Lisa, the biggest thing that people are going to realize when when students walk into school are the amount of signage that's been implemented. We have signage in both English and Spanish. We also have signage for COVID awareness, signage, denoting that masks are required in our buildings, signage that also denotes hand washing is a must, and also for our water fountains, which we've disabled, we've got signage for those, saying they're not in use. Also, what individuals also see, they'll see a lot of floor markings, particularly in the front entrances, front offices areas, bathrooms, stressing the social distancing requirements in all of those areas. And the schools have also gone out and applied some markings in their hallways to show students, to stay 6 feet apart, things of that nature. Also we have hand sanitizer and things all in every classroom. So we've done a lot of work this summer, in the preparation for this.
And moving forward throughout the school year, how will we handle some of the cleaning procedures throughout the school day?
Well, significant disinfection is the key to controlling this. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure surfaces that people are touched by multiple people, such as door handles, desks, phones, light switches, faucets, things of that nature, they're going to be cleaned, during the day regularly. Cafeteria areas, as well as restrooms. We've socially distanced restrooms, and also they will be checked hourly for cleanliness and making sure that we have the needed soap, hand sanitizer, things of that nature in there.
And do we have enough of soap and hand sanitizer and products?
Yes, ma'am. We work very diligently, and the state has provided, an abundance of that. We've purchased our own, so we feel really good about where we are, with our supplies at this moment.
Perfect. Sounds good. I think we're ready. We will now move to health, our health services department, and we have Miss Tammy Truelove joining us. And she's been also extremely busy since March and even a little bit before that during this whole pandemic. And if you could explain a little bit about our relationship and your relationship with our many health partners and how our plan was developed from their guidance.
We had to look at several reference points, Lisa, and one of those being the Centers for Disease Control, or the CDC. We were receiving updates from them pretty frequently, and then we began getting more frequent updates from our collaborative partner, South Carolina DHEC, for our local constituents. So what we look at with those particular documents is what do we need to do for our processes within the schools and to maintain our guidelines for the health and safety of our staff and students. All of the recommendations that we receive from our collaborative partners are based on the science and based on what we currently know about the virus. It is a fluid situation, it is ever changing, and so we are updated pretty frequently on things that we may have to look at or things that we may have to change. So I hope that everybody understands that with our collaborative partners, we are making changes based on the recommendations that they send us routinely.
And can you explain a little bit about how we're requiring not only our students but our staff to self-check before they come to school, and what kind of things are we asking parents to look for?
What we're asking right now is for staff and students to do a self-assessment every day before you would attempt to come to school. The most important things that they need to look at or look for are shortness of breath or any difficulty breathing, loss of taste or smell, or a new or worsening cough. Those symptoms would automatically trigger us to exclude a student for evaluation for COVID-19. If your child is experiencing any of those symptoms, please do not send them to school, okay? The one thing that needs to be understood is if any of those symptoms are related to an underlying condition, then that child may not be excluded at that point if we can explain it, like the child has asthma or a child has an underlying sinus or allergy condition, then we would not necessarily exclude that child. Those are not the only symptoms that we look for. A lot of adults will tell us they've had fever. Fever is not an overriding symptom, so with or without a fever, if you have any of the other symptoms on the list that we've provided, then you should not attempt to come to school at that point. Muscle aches, headaches, worsening cough, nausea, vomiting, or diarrhea could also indicate that you may need to seek further medical care.
And then as we're welcoming students and staff back, can you talk a little bit about the masking requirements that we developed under our reopening plan and what kind of masks are allowed within our schools?
We are allowing the cloth face masks in our schools, and there are a variety of face masks that are available. Some of the masks you can see, they're called gaiters, they're around the neck and you can pull them up. We have clear face masks that are available. I do not want the public to be confused that face shields are clear face masks. They are not. Face shields are currently not recommended by the CDC because they do not provide the level of protection that we require for our staff and students. So what we have required is if you're entering, exiting, or in public areas of our buildings, we want you masked. And that is protection for you and for others. So that is one of our requirements. When you're entering, exiting, or riding on the bus, you should have a mask on. If students come to the bus with no mask, they will be offered a mask by the driver or the assistant so that they can board the bus and come on to school. What about the instance when we don't have a mask or we don't need to use a mask? Your children younger than 2 would not require a mask. Anyone with any difficulty breathing, anyone who cannot remove that mask without assistance. And those individuals with special health care plans, such as an IEP, a 504, or some of those issues that we may need to make accommodations or alternative choices for, those individuals would not be wearing a mask.
And notifications of positive cases is something that everybody will be interested in knowing moving forward. So we do have some information on our website and address it in our reopening plan, but can you explain a little bit about the notification process that parents may receive?
Last week, we received information that the governor is going to require all schools to collect and compile and publicly report any confirmed COVID-19s in our schools. The public needs to understand that DHEC has also worked on a very exclusive process that will compile and report the information twice weekly. In that report, they will divide it by school, they will divide it by student and staff members, and that information will not be able to be tied to an individual within the school and no one will know that that particular individual is positive. There are a lot of guidelines and a lot of protective mechanisms in place to protect the identity of individuals. So with that, DHEC decided to assign a nurse to each region of schools. And so our district has been divided up into clusters so that one DHEC nurse is in charge of maybe 4 or 5 schools, and those school nurses will report directly to that DHEC nurse to compile the information necessary for us to keep up with our COVID tracking.
So it's my understanding those biweekly reports will come out on Tuesdays and Fridays on DHEC's website. And so we will also be able to link to that from Horry County Schools website for people to get that information. But as far as internal notifications regarding close contacts or positive cases, how will we handle that at a school level?
At a school level, the nurse will be heavily involved in that, and she will be working very closely with the DHEC nurse, but we are going to actually assist them in doing that contact tracing within the school itself and supplying that information back to DHEC so that they can get a thorough picture of what we have going on within the school.
There's been a lot of conversation recently regarding teachers being deemed critical infrastructure and quarantine requirements regarding close contacts with someone who has tested positive. Can you kind of talk, I know we've talked about it as an organization, and kind of share how we plan to address that?
In the current DHEC guidelines, teachers can be considered critical infrastructure employees. And through all of this, and in looking at all the recommendations, we have to follow the DHEC guidelines that are given to us at a minimum. We can be stricter as an organization and develop our policy in a different manner as long as we meet the minimum requirements. So at this time, our Horry County employees who are positive for COVID-19 will not report to work, and they will follow the recommended DHEC guidelines for quarantine at this point.
Now, if a staff or student throughout the school day, say after lunch, starts to come down with some symptoms and visit the school nurse, how will we kind of handle those cases?
If a student becomes ill during the day, the teacher will call the school nurse, and then the child will be sent to the nurse. She will assess the child, make sure the child has a mask on, and we will put the child in an isolation room that is monitored until the parent is able to get there and pick the child up. If our staff becomes sick during the school day, they will notify their immediate supervisor, who will then contact our school nurse, and that staff member should immediately go home and seek medical care if that is needed at that point in time.
Over the last several months, more information has come out about COVID-19, and people are learning more about it. And we've seen a lot of changes over the last couple of months from DHEC guidelines. Do you see a lot of changes or updates to those guidelines possibly within the next 6 months or within the school year?
We are working with a very unpredictable virus. The more information we get, the better guidance we get from DHEC and our collaborative partners. So sometimes that means that we have to change a process every week. I know that it's frustrating and it's aggravating for the staff, but we are actually following the best recommendation at that point in time for the virus. We have to monitor closely the information that we receive to make sure we are current with recommended guidelines. And I hope that our stakeholders understand that our goal is to have the best information available to you when we receive it, and we put the procedures in place so that we can provide a safe learning environment, not only for your children, but for our staff.
Thank you. And I strategically had Mr. Wilkes follow Ms. Truelove, because when we talk about students and becoming sick and having to stay home, attendance is something that parents are concerned about. Our attendance, I think, will look a little bit different this school year because of COVID-19. So can you explain a little bit about how attendance will be counted this year, both on a hybrid and on our brick and mortar schedules?
Okay. With the hybrid, the children would be allowed to come to school as the, certain days that we have them noted, scheduled for. If they don't come, naturally they will be marked absent. If they attend when we go on virtual, they go online. If they don't do any work during that time, then they would be counted as absent. If they don't log in, if they don't do the work as assigned, then they would in fact be counted as absent during that time. And the same with brick and mortar. If you don't attend, then at the regular time, you will be counted as absent.
Will excused absences look different this year regarding sick notes and?
So the only excused absent that would look different this year would be those that have the symptoms that Ms. Truelove spoke about earlier. They can notify the school, let them know that the child is exhibiting the certain symptoms that she described. And at that time, they would be considered excused.
Will any of those changes affect the HCS promotion and retention policies that we currently have in place?
No, they will not. The same criteria takes place for promotion and retention. Should a child miss 10 consecutive days for a year-long class, or 10 unlawful absences for a year-long class, or have 5 unlawful absences for a semester-long class, then they can fail due to non-attendance during that time.
And so truancy would pretty much stay the same?
Yes.
As it has been in previous
Yes,
years?
the 3 consecutive or 5 or more unlawful absences, children are deemed as being truant at that time.
Okay, thank you. Our last part that we have today is athletics. Academics is important, but athletics is important as well to a lot of our students. And so we have Ms. Allen here with us, and she can briefly explain a little bit about what the South Carolina High School League is and how that organization manages athletics throughout our school year.
The South Carolina High School League is our governing body for our athletic programs. And basically, we look to them for guidance. And they have given us a lot of guidance during the COVID-19 pandemic. How to practice, what that looks like, different procedures that we should follow. So that's basically the role they play in our athletic program.
And what kind of health protocols do we currently have in place to protect our players and coaching staff?
Currently, we screen every player as they come to practice to make sure that they're not exhibiting symptoms or running a fever. We make sure that each one of them has a mask, so when they're not actively engaged in the activity, that mask should be on. We have had in-services with our coaches, with our athletic directors and our trainers to make sure that we still practice social distancing. We're making sure that each athlete has their own water bottle. We're not sharing water bottles. And then obviously we're cleaning the facility after each practice.
Okay, and I know some of those changes in game schedules will change, likely will be affected by COVID-19, but spectators, I know people not only want to play sports, but they want to come and watch their kids play sports. So how will that work this year?
Well, recently, as recent as last week, we were granted an exception by the Department of Commerce to actually have more spectators than we thought we were going to be allowed to have. But we're in the process right now of each of our gymnasiums, our tennis courts, our football stadiums to determine how many spectators we can have at each site. And we're going to have to make sure they are 6 feet apart. And so we're in the process of looking at that to just determine how many people we can let in, because there will be a maximum number that can attend.
Okay, that sounds great. I want to thank all of our guests for joining us today. And we have just 1 week left before students will return inside of our school buildings and classrooms, and we're so excited to see them. Our parents and students will be receiving additional information for their schools throughout this week. So we ask that you look at your email messages and your phone calls that you will be receiving. And we will also be providing additional information on our Horry County Schools District website, which is horrycountyschools.net. And we will also have information on our social media pages. And if by chance there were some questions that we were not able to answer for you today, please reach out to us and email us at hcsinfo@horrycountyschools.net. Thank you again for spending time with us today, and I will turn it over to Dr. Maxey for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate you and the communications team facilitating this meeting to give us an opportunity to share with our parents and students and community stakeholders what Horry County Schools is doing to prepare for a return to education in this time of the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the things that I want to ask all of our stakeholders is to understand that Horry County Schools is a large organization. We have a lot of wonderful people. We have the first group, 45,000 wonderful students. and we also have about 6,000 employees. It's the third largest school district in the state of South Carolina. For us to make the type of adaptations that we've had to make in order to contend with the virus and to make sure that we are providing a safe learning environment for our students and a safe working environment for our staff, we have spent a lot of time planning and, of course, drawing upon the expertise of our partners, in particular working with South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control to make sure that we are using science to make decisions as we move forward for this school year. It's going to be unlike any other, and you know, I am looking forward to the day as parents are, students, and our employees, that we return to what we considered normal. But until then, I want to assure you that we will do everything within our power to make sure that we take into consideration all of the health concerns that would affect our students and our employees, because ultimately that's the most important thing, is taking care of our health. So as we look forward to the 2021 school year, it's going to be different, but we're excited about it because Horry County Schools is committed to providing quality education to the students of our county, and we consider it our obligation, and we say, to inspire the possibilities for our students. Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you out there.